Okay, so this is podcast number 2, and okay, so this podcast is going to be going over um, Romans chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, and the title of this is going to be To Judge or Not to Judge. So let's get started. Once again, I am reading because I've got to keep ourselves on track, because if I don't, we're going to end up all over the board. So I have a lot of notes. We're going to read the scriptures first. Therefore, you are without excuse. Oh, man. Everyone who is judging, for wherein you are judging another, you are judging against yourself, inasmuch as you do the very things you are judging. Wow, doesn't that speak volumes? But we know that the judgment of Yahweh is according to truth upon those who commit such things. But do you suppose, O man, who judges those doing such things, that you will escape the judgment of Yahweh while you do the same? So let's kind of cut this apart and see what's going on here. The churches, they commonly teach that Christians are not supposed to judge. This passage is often quoted by them erroneously to support that claim. But notice that Paul does not condemn the Romans or the ecclesians in Rome for judging, but rather he accused them of being hypocrites. He said that they were guilty of the very same things for which they were judging others. That is hypocrisy. He told them that in judging others, that they were also judging themselves. Now, Shaul didn't tell them to stop judging. He only said that judges should not judge hypocritically. Judgment is a good thing. Everything we do in life requires at least a basic element of judgment. I mean, if you don't, you're going to end up in the wrong crowd. I mean, we could just, we could take this concept of not judging and carry it out to a whole host of absurd possibilities. But the fact is, we all judge almost every moment of our daily lives. We have to. Period. As righteous believers, we are supposed to judge right from wrong and good from evil, up from down, left from right. I mean, there are certain basic fundamental things in life that just are. The good things, the bad things, the right things, the wrong things. Unless we do this, unless we're able to judge and discern good and evil, right and wrong, there is no possibility that we can follow Yahweh's royal law. Can be done. unless we judge, we can't even identify his law. No one is exempt from the requirement of judging or from being judged. Paul taught against hypocrisy in judging. He did not teach against the act of judging itself. Indeed, Yahweh demands that we judge. In Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. Learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, and plead for the widow. Then in the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 3, 4, and 5. So in verse 3, do you not know that you shall judge messengers, angels, preachers? Do you not know that you shall judge angels? More so matters of life. Indeed, therefore, if you have criteria in the matters of life, you seat the unesteemed as judges. I speak to your shame. Is there no one wise among you who can judge between his brethren? John chapter 7, verse 24. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. In other words, judge in a way that is righteous, true, right, holy, not as a hypocrite. I'm pretty much done with this section, so I'm going to go on ahead. Let me see. We can go over verses 4 and 5, Romans chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. It's gonna go a little ways. Yeah, we can do this. Okay, so, and the title of this is Dealing Yourself out of Yahweh's plan. So verse 4, chapter 2. Now this is coming off of verse 3. So, or do you despise the riches of his goodness and forbearance and long-suffering, not knowing that the goodness of Yahweh leads you to repentance? But according to your hardness and unrepentant heart, you are treasuring up to yourself wrath in the day of wrath and the revealing of Yahweh's righteous judgment. Here, Paul is asking a rhetorical... Man, my tongue is all twisted. Here, Paul is asking a rhetorical question. He tells these very people that they have received grace, long-suffering, and goodness from Yahweh, and yet some of them are unwilling to extend to others that very same grace that they themselves received. And this makes them a hypocrite. These people were Israelites. They had received the government. I can't read. They had received the goodness of Yahweh, this new covenant. They had been granted grace, and then they took it in vain. This obdurate attitude and hypocrisy is addressed also in another book, in the book of Hebrews. Let's take a look at that right quick. In Hebrews chapter 10, verses 26 and 27. For if we sin willfully after receiving the knowledge of the truth, man, you better pay attention here. We all had better pay attention here. For if we sin willfully after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there remains no more sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the contrary ones. These were wolves among the flock. They received Yahweh's grace, but they didn't appreciate it. Yahweh's grace was not enough for them. Thus, therefore, there wasn't anything left for them but a fearful anticipation of judgment and indignation, unless and until they repented. And I don't know, the way that I'm reading that, there may not be any forgiveness once you come into the knowledge of truth, and then you willingly sin anyway. So in Hebrews chapter 10, the next two verses, verse 28 and 29, he that despised Moses' law died without mercy under the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much worse punishment, suppose you, shall he be thought worthy who has trodden underfoot the Son of Yahweh, and who has counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was sanctified an unholy thing, and has despised the Spirit of grace. Wow. Oh, this is some powerful stuff. You know, this kind of language can divide. It will cut out anyone who's not serious. And it goes back to what we said before. Right out of the gate, Paul intends to get rid of anyone who isn't serious. Now, these people had received Yahweh's grace and forgiveness through the blood of YHWH of the new covenant. Some of these same people were now claiming credit themselves for those gifts from Yahweh, and were trying to deny those very gifts to others who needed them the same as they had needed them. These were hypocrites, and by their attitudes, they were bringing shame upon the covenant. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living Yahweh. In chapters 1 and 2, Paul indicated this was happening to certain Romans, to certain called out people in the cities of Rome at that time. They were in the process of falling into the hands of the living Yahweh. I mean, this is what's going on even today. There are many people that I know for a fact they want it all for themselves, but you know, they kicked me out of the fellowship. So this is not something that has changed over 2,000 years. It is very important to understand that the judgment of Yahweh was active back then, as well as it is today. This judgment of Yahweh is not something that's going to come in the very distant future. and everybody's going to round it up and then they're going to be judged. This is something that happens all the time, because ever since YHWH was raised up and seated at the right hand of his Father, the kingdom exists, and it is in force even at this very moment. So as a result, as a functioning, operating kingdom, there are also periods and times of judgment against individuals who cross the line. The day of wrath means the judgment of Yahweh. Yahweh's judgment and his wrath was present and active as Shaul was writing this letter. Judgment is not withheld until a so-called end time. And this is taught in churches, and it's just not scriptural. Yahweh judges man in every age. And we've seen it many times in history. The judgment that fell in Jerusalem in 70 AD is one example of a day of wrath, or judgment day. Yahweh judges men according to their deeds, and that judgment is active at all times throughout the ages. These are, in Hebraic culture, cycles of time. And the way that the ancient Hebraic culture perceives time is much different than we perceive it here in the Western culture. We'll go over that someday. Therefore, when we see evil around us and rising above us, we should not suppose that the evil is caused by the lack of Yahweh's judgment. We should not assume that Yahweh is waiting until the end, the last day, to judge everyone, as churchgoers are so fond of saying. Rather, we should realize that when evil rises above us, it is a punishment upon us for ignoring Yahweh's laws, his principles. In other words, when evil prospers among us, as it is today, it is not due to the lack of Yahweh's judgment, but rather it is evidence of judgment for our disobedience. Evil is not the result of a passive Elohim. It is the natural result of our own disobedience. It is Yahweh's active judgment, blessing or curse upon us, as described all the way back in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Let me read that. And it shall come to pass, if you will hearken diligently to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, to observe and do all of his commandments which I command you to this day, that Yahweh your Elohim will set you on high above the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, if you will hearken unto the voice of Yahweh your Elohim. But it shall come to pass, that if you will not hearken to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, to observe, to do all of his commandments and his statutes, which I command you this day, that all of these curses shall come upon you, and they will overtake you. Moreover, all of these curses shall come upon you, they shall pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not listen, you did not heed the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded you. And they shall be upon you for a sign and for a wonder, and upon your seed forever, because you did not serve Yahweh your Elohim with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. Therefore you will serve your enemies, which Yahweh shall send against you. You will serve them in hunger, you will serve them in thirst, you will serve them in nakedness, and you will serve them in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon your neck until he has destroyed you. Now I want you to think about something here. Think about this. In the not too distant past, people seemed to better understand judgment as Yahweh's blessings or cursing, reward or punishment. Today, in the 21st century, people have fallen into a state of apathetic denial. The popular lie is that all bad things come from a supernatural devil who rules the earth, and that Jesus is helpless against this devil until a future millennial age. People would rather not admit that they are at fault or that judgment is upon them. Instead, they blame their hard times on luck or on a so-called Satan. They sing God Bless America, and they salute the flag with while their churches tell them to trust the government and fear communists or Islamic terrorists. Perhaps we should fear Christians. Just a thought. And there's a reason for that. We're going to address that in just a few podcasts down the road. So that's the end of this, and the next podcast is going to go over Romans chapter 2, verses 6, 7, 8, and 9. I look forward to talking to you then. Goodbye.